What's up, fight fans? Ryan Thomas, the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, coming to you live on YouTube and Facebook. You can tune into the podcast on any and all audio podcasting platforms, whether it's Facebook or not Facebook, that's the viewing, Facebook, YouTube, as I just mentioned, but listening on any audio podcasting platform, of course. Breaking down all things sports, whether it's football, whether it's mixed martial arts, whether it's the NHL, whether it's boxing, you name it, trying to break down any and all sports. This is not just a one-stop sports show. This is a all-encompassing sports show. This is not just a football podcast, although I have the new Thomas Take football helmet logo and I'm wearing a Buffalo Bills hat on this podcast tonight, of course, repping my Bills, but I'm talking all things Francis Ngannou, and we are going to go inside the octagon, or the smart cage, as PFL calls it, because that's where we will see Francis Ngannou compete in his next mixed martial arts bout, as Francis Ngannou has signed with the PFL, the Professional Fighters League, and understanding the MMA landscape as well as I've been able to do over the years, understanding that for a long time there were several leagues that tried to rival the UFC, and those were kind of swallowed over the course of the last 10 to 15 years, providing you a brief history lesson that would feature Pride, that would feature Strike Force, that would feature the WEC. Over the years, leagues have come to the surface in terms of being true competition for the Ultimate Fighting Championship, leagues like the PFL, as well as Bellator. And the fact that the PFL has been as successful as it's been in this short amount of time that it's existed is one thing. But when you can reel in the biggest fish in a big pond, and it's arguably the biggest free agent signing in combat sports history, I think that says a lot about your organization. So, first off, given credit where credit is due, the Professional Fighters League, big props to Ray Sefo and the boys in the building that were able to make this happen, because a lot of people wondered whether Francis would actually sign with another mixed martial arts promotion, myself included. But as I started to hear rumblings of this, it became pretty apparent that Francis Ngannou was going to sign with the PFL, and not one championship, and not Bellator, and certainly not the UFC, with everything that we're aware of that Francis has gone through with the Ultimate Fighting Championship over the course of the last few years. So this was a huge moment for Francis. This was a huge moment for the PFL, and the fact that they were able to get this done. Now, the terms of this deal, as I look at these right now, the terms of this deal are very interesting. The reason why this is such significant news is not only due to the stature of the fighter that we're talking about, Francis Ngannou, the current lineal, I guess you could say lineal, not the current champ, but the lineal UFC heavyweight champion. He never lost the title. He was only stripped of that title by not fighting in the UFC after a year-long hiatus, where the UFC put the belt up for grabs, and John Jones was able to capture the UFC heavyweight championship with a performance, a dominant one, against Cyril Gane, who was a rival to Francis Ngannou, and the last opponent that Ngannou has actually faced in his last UFC fight, his last mixed martial arts fight as well. So Ngannou had his demands, and his demands were met. And I put this statement out earlier today, and it got me some flack. I don't really know why, but I really felt like Francis Ngannou, with this move, it signified that Francis Ngannou was playing chess while everybody else in the fight game was playing checkers. And it's a term that's used with masterminds, with geniuses at their craft, guys like Bill Belichick, Phil Jackson. But your move, Francis Ngannou, and you made it, right? When you went out there and you made the demands that you made, saying that I wanted something more. I wanted a more significant role within the company that I'm fighting for. I wanted more of a stance that would be heard. I wanted my stance to be heard, and my stance is for the fighters, and I want the fighters to reap the reward that is fighting me. And you look at the bullet points of this deal as it was released, and you'd see that Francis is not only getting paid a 7-figure salary on a 2 to 3 fight contract. Nobody knows how long the fight contract is. We know it's short. We know it's for a few fights, couple fights, 2 to 3 fights, 2 to 4 fights potentially, where Francis could get 7-figure paydays per fight. So, in terms of that, getting that 7-figure payday per fight, he is also becoming an ambassador to the PFL and I guess, presidente of PFL Africa, which is, I'm assuming, a lifelong type of role where he will represent the PFL, attracting the PFL to the African country, of course, and that's very important to the country of Africa, I should say. That is very important to Francis due to the fact that he came from very humble beginnings, humble background, to put it mildly, scratching and clawing his way out of a rigorous life in Cameroon, and a life that it's a true remarkable story to know where Francis came from to where he is now, essentially being the one and only free agent that has been able to call his shots at the level that he did, the level that he was able to. So when I look at this situation here, um, I think more than anything, people will poke and prod this information. They will say, "Well, man, Francis didn't really shouldn't have should he sold out. He was selfish. He was this. He was that." I don't agree with that at all. You know, Francis went out as the UFC heavyweight champion and said the UFC needs to pay me more money. The UFC doesn't only need to pay me more money; they need to pay their fighters more money. And I want to have a career that is far more significant than the career that I'm having. And the best way for him to do that was to test his value. And he did test his value. He did go out and test the market with other companies, and those other companies gave him offers, some that he liked, some didn't even make him offers. Some made him offers that he wasn't going to bite on. But the PFL made him an offer that he simply could not refuse. He made his demands, and they met his demands. So anytime in a business sense where you're able to meet your demands, you're able to make your demands and have them be met and heard, that just goes to show you the respect that Francis has actually been able to accumulate over the course of this short period of time that he has been a free agent in the sport of mixed martial arts, which is still so young, still so new, and it's still so rare to see a fighter of Francis's stature become a free agent and be a free agent for as long as he has been. And frankly, the fight fans want to see Francis fight. And the big part of this news that I don't like is the fact that we still won't see Francis Ngannou fight in a mixed martial arts contest at the very least until 2024. What this contract does allow Francis to do is to box in between now and 2024. So something very big for Francis's future, that he's going to be able to box somebody in between now and the start of 2024, the first quarter of 2024, when he's supposed to fight his first PFL fight. As well, any opponent that Francis steps in there with will get $2 million plus pay-per-view points, being the main event of the super fight division in the pay-per-view division inside the sport of PFL. Not all the events on PFL are pay-per-view events. They're mostly ESPN Plus events, but they are now dabbling into pay-per-view, and they needed a pay-per-view draw to do that. So that checks off the box of Francis Ngannou being that pay-per-view draw. So this is very fun. And, there's people out there that I know in the business side of mixed martial arts that they hold out the belief that Francis Ngannou will never fight for the PFL, that he was just signing his name on the bottom line to get a cushiony, front office job. I don't know what to think of that. I do think that Francis wants to fight. It's just a question of respect and loyalty and having that be reciprocated within a company that he feels is able to do that. And PFL was willing to oblige. And they're getting their cut of this too. They will collect once he does fight inside the PFL. They will, get more eyeballs on the brand that is growing, that has grown. It's just a matter of time in terms of when he fights, and we'll see that growth. I do believe he will fight. I think he wants to fight. It's just a matter of finding the right opponent and finding the right opportunity organization-wise that would allow him the opportunity to box. And I think he's going to be able to box. I don't know who he's going to box against. I think many people are overzealous in the thought process that Francis is going to box Tyson Fury. I don't see that happening. I don't see Alexander Usyk. I don't see, some of the top tier. I mean, maybe Anthony Joshua, maybe Deontay Wilder. I know that fight was actually pretty close to happening. I'd hold out hope for one of those two guys. Those would actually be more intriguing matchups, or just as intriguing matchups, because Usyk and Fury are the top two dogs of the heavyweight boxing division, of course. Those are the two guys that I want to see box each other for the boxing sake of things in that sport. But for the sake of Francis's career, I understand it. I get it. And I respect the fact that he went out on a limb and kind of bet on himself and was able to get what he wanted. Many people thought that he was not going to get what he wanted. And the fact that he was able to get what he wanted, I think says a lot to the character that he has, to the resolve that he has. He did not care about taking one fight with the UFC that would have made him a lot of money. He cared more about taking fights with boxing or PFL and really make his name more of an attraction. And that's kind of how I think a lot of these fighters are going to take note of this deal. This deal changes a lot. There's no doubt about it that it's the biggest deal inside the sport of mixed martial arts that's ever been seen in terms of a per fight deal. Is he going to be making more money than Conor McGregor? No. But what I mean by this is the biggest deal ever, the biggest contract in MMA history for any free agent that there has ever been. Nobody's made more money per fight. Nobody's going to make more money in terms of pay-per-view dollars and be offered a position of high rank within an organization. No fighter has been offered that's been active. There's been guys that have been trying to make a fighters union inside the mixed martial arts, realm, guys like Randy Couture that are, long retired. Francis Ngannou doing this where he's, doing this obviously as an active fighter. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this creates a ripple effect within the sport. I hope that being that Francis is signed with the PFL, that puts them in a situation with mixed martial arts fighters where they're looking at their careers and they're saying to themselves, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to test my value, test the market. That's what NFL players do. That's what Major League Baseball players do, NBA, NHL. There's no reason why boxers can't test the market, or can test the market rather, be their own self-promoters, and mixed martial arts fighters, once they're out of their contract, that they can't do that too. Francis Ngannou is doing that. Nate Diaz is doing that. And I think more mixed martial arts fighters need to do that. They really do. And I think this is the first deal that's going to jump out at a lot of people that's going to say, man, this guy actually did it. He bet on himself and he had his demands, and he had his demands met. Now, in terms of what I discussed with the facet of the contract where his opponent has to make $2 million to fight him, that's going to be it. That's the most interesting part of this contract to me, because there isn't a heavyweight on the PFL roster right now that deserves a $2 million or could generate the worthiness of having a $2 million payday. I couldn't rattle off three names of PFL heavyweights. I couldn't do it. But if there's other free agents that are mixed martial arts heavyweights and they want to get paid, just like Francis Ngannou did, well, the Francis Ngannou fight is out there. It's going to attract other fighters to the PFL. And I think that's the goal with this signing more than anything. It's a goal of Francis's to get what he wanted out of the contract, but it's a goal of the PFL's as well to get their end of the bargain, where this will bolster their brand and really help their brand. It's well known that the UFC in North America is massive. It's well known that ONE FC in Asia is gigantic. And globally, ONE FC is actually pulling in bigger numbers worldwide than the UFC is. The PFL knows that Viacom owns Bellator, which Viacom is a massive company, right? They're worth billions. They got Paramount, they're huge, obviously. So the fact that PFL has kind of scratched and clawed its way up to where it is, and to make this signing is truly astonishing. And I'm curious to see how this is going to look on their books in their future. Will this negatively impact their future just as much as I predict that it could positively, if not more? Could this be a situation where this actually puts PFL out of business? I hope not. I hope that they have the money to eat, the fact that they just shelled out, 3 7-figure paydays on record on contract to Francis Ngannou, and they're obviously paying him off the books outside of the cage with his position as a global ambassador to for the PFL for Africa as well. PFL bringing in Jake Paul for a MMA foray at some point in 2023 or 2024. That is what it is. We'll see what happens with that. This is the real topic. This is the real situation, that a real champion of a combat sport, not only a real champion of mixed martial arts, but a champion of the biggest organization in mixed martial arts, the UFC, with the best fighters, that can easily be stated. Francis Ngannou was number one. Never lost that title. Only had it stripped of him because he wasn't willing to fight for the money that the UFC was giving him. So he is the baddest man on the planet. John Jones never beat him. John Jones never fought him, and vice versa. That's a fight that I want. Eventually, I think we can get it, but I think I'm being bashful in saying that. With this news that Francis is going to the PFL, by the time those two guys ever do fight, if they do fight, they'll be both well past their prime if they were to ever fight. So I don't see it happening, to be quite honest with you. Hate to say it, but I don't. But I'm very thankful that Francis decided to go this route, because I think he was doing it for the right reasons. He's doing it to set a point, set an example in mixed martial arts that you too can test the market. You too can make your demands, but you got to earn the right to do that. And without Francis and his career in the UFC, without the UFC, Francis wouldn't have been able to make these demands. That the platform of the UFC allowed Francis to make these demands, and partially the accomplishments that he had within that platform. So one hand washes the other. Francis moves on from the UFC, finally signs a deal. He's got a deal locked in with the Professional Fighters League, the PFL, anticipated to make his PFL debut in 2024. And I'm greatly looking forward to it. Also greatly looking forward to the fact that the PFL is allowing Francis to potentially box if, in fact, he's able to get an opponent. That's a lot easier said than done, but something to keep our eyes out on. So the biggest news in mixed martial arts in quite some time. Make no mistake about it, this is the biggest contract in MMA history, and I'm greatly looking forward to seeing what happens with Francis Ngannou, as we all are as fight fans. Plenty more coming up on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. I'll be back on the pod to discuss the recent announcement for UFC 291 as well as UFC 292. Some big fights that are on the docket that I'm going to obviously dive into. Give you my thoughts on some of the news that are surrounding some of the newest fight announcements. Thank you so much for tuning in, and talk to you soon.